Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everyone to the Emotional Entrepreneur Show with Summer and
Jen!
We're
here
in the house. So today on the Emotional Entrepreneur Show, we're talking about something really important right now: managing anxiety in uncertain times. This is a big subject, man. I mean, there's a lot going on in the world, a lot going on, with people personally and professionally. And everything we're talking about today, really, it transfers over into our professional arena. And really, it's how we personally are impacted when our angst starts rising, right? And so what can we do about that? I'm going to turn this over to Jen as I look at LinkedIn. Jen, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think especially with what's happening lately, there's so much. Not only is there so much happening, but it's happening all at once. It's happening so quickly. And then it's not even little things. They're like major big things. Obviously, the presidency, then people being mandated to go back into the physical office. We have the fires here in Los Angeles. I mean, deportation, just on and on and on and on. There's just a lot of things happening that are very, very big, major stuff. And I can't imagine, how people are having to, deal with that. So there's a lot of emotions involved. There's a lot of like, what's next? I can't even think about when we have like even, regular problems and how that can affect us and our nervous system and how we even just show up, and it's like you just get so overloaded. But when you have a series of a bunch of different things that are really huge, it's like, oh my gosh, like where do you even start? Like what are some of the things that we can do to just start to, okay, what's next? What can I do? And I think when we feel stuck, that's very frustrating, and we feel hopeless.
Good words. Frustrated, stuck, hopeless, right? Discouraged. So, Bibiana says, feels like we got pancaked by a flying saucer. Yeah. And hey there, Mike. Yes, there's so many things that are changing in the world, even military, transgender. There was an order signed that they can no longer serve. So there's a
These are
lot.
big. These are huge things. These are little tiny changes.
Yeah, those are huge. Bibiana says, when people call me now, I lift weights and do squats while we're talking, getting that strength up. Yeah, it's that resiliency muscle. It's perception. How are we perceiving this? It is for those of us that are empaths and also that are helpers, people helpers. How are we taking that on? How are we absorbing that in our body and our mind? How are we taking on our own personal angst, right? Because as you said, Jen, there's some big things. People having orders to return to the office. It's not that they haven't worked, they've been working all along. It's returning to the office. That's going to impact the family, the single parent, kids going to daycare, the cost of that, transportation, increased money going out. And here's the thing, that's just one situation. Then, as you said, deportation, you know, I was watching the news last night in different channels, and basically said people aren't who are immigrants, they're not going into their jobs for fear that they're going to be separated from their families. They're not sending their kids to school. They are frightened. They are frightened. It is absolutely discouraging, frightening,
Yeah.
thinking that you're going to be separated. So guess what? How does that impact the economy, right? So people are going to start stressing out because fruits and vegetables are going to go up in price because guess what? Nobody's picking those fruits and vegetables. Nobody's clearing out those crops. Nobody is harvesting those trees where we get walnuts and almonds and all those things that we eat every day. So it's not just about me, and letting my ego get in the way or my constituents get in the way of what's good for America, right? So it's these stressors that we look at, that we take in, that we absorb, that we are, you know, how we respond. And we've talked about this a lot, that response versus reaction. Now, here's the thing. I've worked in the human services field for a long time. I've worked in it during many different presidencies, during many different changes in our economy, you felt it, Jen. You lost everything. You were honest with that. You said there's been points where you lost everything. We've all been impacted by different things. My husband's was in the military for 21 years. What that looked like during each presidency, so it's a lot for people, especially military is going to be going down to the border. That means that those military members are going to be separated from their families a lot more. So there's just so much going on all at once. As Bibiana said, I think she made a really good point. We all just feel like we've been pancaked by flying saucers, right? And so and this is great. She's talking about also lifting weights and doing squats, right? And the great thing about that is those neurotransmitters. How are we exercising those neurotransmitters to feed our body and our brain, not to the point where we're like, catastrophizing everything, but where we're actually managing that angst. And so, as I said, I've worked in the mental health field, human services field for a long time. And a lot of things that, people come in and they start talking about A, B, or C, but what really they want is to be heard. They don't need us to necessarily solve their problems, but they need to get it out. They need to feel recognized. They need to feel heard. But these big things that are going on in our world right now, people are struggling because they don't know how to juggle it all. And it's all coming at once. Thoughts, Jen? Thoughts out there?
Yeah. Bibiana also said, I think it feels so overwhelming is most people have barely even recovered from the lockdown stuff. Yeah. It's like, my gosh, can we get a break? It's so heavy. And, it's so heartbreaking also for me to think about how these families are living in fear of like, my gosh, I need to go to work to
Yeah.
get some money to put food on the table and feed my family. But by the same token, like I don't want to leave because something might happen.
Yeah.
And then imagine the weight of feeling that possible guilt of like if something happens and I went to work, I can imagine, a mother or a father even saying or thinking like, I couldn't forgive myself if that happened because I left.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of conflict and turmoil that's happening internally, and it's just it's unreal. It's
Yeah.
unreal. And when you talk about like our crops, and especially here in California, we have like
Agriculture.
yeah, we have agriculture. I mean, Summer's family has history and all that.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, what's so crazy? It's like no, I won't say that. But what I think is crazy is the people that were, I guess, for all this, you're not going to be the ones going out to the farms. Let's be real.
Yeah.
You're not going to want to take over those people's jobs. So
You
now who's going
know,
to do it?
I'm going to be real honest here and I'm going to say it because I lived in California for years. I've lived in other states, North Carolina. I've lived in now outside of DC in Northern Virginia, Northern Virginia. Not one time outside of a management personnel have I ever seen a white face in those crops.
Yeah,
The
you're not
only
gonna be
time
filling out no application, picking some grapes and the pistachio nuts.
No, the only time I knew of somebody in my family were my grandparents through the Great Depression where they were coming from Oklahoma and they're white and she had 5 sisters and she was working the not the fields, but the crops of like almond trees and walnut trees. And they were picking and doing things like that just to make ends meet as they came across the country. So yeah, it's not completely unheard of, but honestly, the majority of people are not white. They are brown faced. They are in those crops and they are doing the work that I don't see a lot of people, even our teenagers would like to do. It's backbreaking work. You're exposed to pesticides. It's hot, it's cold, it's like the elements of every day. Who wants to do that job?
Right. And
It's a
Jadron
tough
said
job.
exactly. She said, "I doubt most people can even handle how physical it is."
Right.
Absolutely. And and now with the era that we're in, where people, especially the Gen Z and alphas, like they're seeing different ways of making money now,
Yeah.
digitally, from the comfort of your own home, anywhere. Basically, it doesn't even have to be at home. Anywhere that there's like way more options now.
Yeah.
So that's another bookend where you have the people who don't want to do it, and then the younger generations who like it's not even an option to do this backbreaking work.
Absolutely. And my Filipino grandfather actually worked those fields, uh, decades ago when he was alive, right? And so that was tough work and it did tear apart families at the time too. My grandmother divorced him because she couldn't handle the migration of the work, right? So there's a lot of things happening. And then, although, I my grandparents were born, one of them, all of them for the most part were born here, except my Filipino grandfather who got citizenship, and they all served in the military and they all did things for this country, right? And so bottom line is people are going through a lot. They are going through a lot. They want to be heard. Maybe they don't have people to talk to. They're afraid. They're discouraged. They're scared, right? So it's a lot of these things are happening right now. Let me give you an example. So there was this one anchor, and I was reading a post from her the other day, and her name is Brooke Baldwin. I absolutely loved her when she was on the news. And she lived in New York for several years, and now she works in Los Angeles. And so she was double parked, or not double parked, she was parked on the side of the street and she metered parking. And some guy, she had just come out of the doctor's office and she was sitting there and she had the right to sit there. She was parked there, she was paying for parking, and she was looking at her prescriptions and she was looking one of the prescriptions up because it was a new prescription. And she said, this guy decided that he would double park and he would come around to her passenger window, knock on the window, and say, "Hey, stupid, when are you going to move?" What would you do if somebody did that? And she sat there. And rather than ignite that situation, she sat there and said, "Okay, I'll be moving soon." And that's what she did. But could you imagine you could react to that versus respond to that? And many people, it could have escalated. People are really stressed right now. But how we handle that, how we respond to that makes a huge difference. And how we respond has to do with perception, how we are thinking about all of this stuff, how are we taking it in, how are we letting it get to us emotionally, what is our emotional attachment and how it's impacting our families. And there's a lot of impact right now, a lot of impact. So what we say is, at least in the mental health field, yes, get the support that you need. Have somebody safe to talk to. What is your perception? Start separating out the fact from the fiction, right? Start separating out what you're watching. Start working on the things that you can little by little. Bibiana says, "Yikes, I would have had the Quentin Tarantino in my mind, but I would stay calm because you don't know what's next and it could escalate fast if you aren't careful." Exactly. Absolutely. And remember, there are a lot of people feeling really raw right now, feeling very disheartened, right? And discouraged. So right now it's really about getting to the root cause of why you're feeling this way, your perception about things right now, how you're taking that in, how you're absorbing that in your mind and your body, how you're coping with that, how we cope with setbacks, and what does that mean to each of us. So I will get to that in a second, but I also want to hear from you and I want to hear from Jen. Thoughts?
It's heavy. Yeah, I think what would be great is just like, what to think about, like what can we do, or what kind of support can people lean on, especially like the kids. And I think one of the things that crossed my mind is, as parents, as adults, and we have kids in our presence, we really have to pay attention to how we're reacting, how we're responding. They're two different things. And
Yeah,
especially with like the example, imagine if she had the lady that was in the car,
real.
and there's a kid in the car. Imagine whatever reaction she if it could have been the opposite reaction. That kid, if there was a kid in the car, is seeing that and can model that. And so it's like we have to really take responsibility of learning how what's the best way I can manage through this, what's the best way I can you know just regulate my emotions during these moments, because I'm also showing and teaching my kids or whoever is around, especially they're young, they're learning those coping skills, or
Yeah,
how to react. And that's what's making me think about, like, what are kids learning from us if we're not even taking account of how we're going to react or how we're choosing to. And that is that could be very damaging, and it is tough, because as the adult, we have to take on that responsibility. But what are we passing down as an example?
absolutely. I love that, Jen. You mentioned so many things, such as modeling, self regulation. Those things are really, really helpful. But first, I'm going to go back to something, being aware of your own emotions, being aware of your own mind, body, your feelings throughout your body. It's really important. And although some people might gaff that off and say, oh, whatever, you're so soft, or you're so, no, these are some of the toughest skills to learn, is how do we recognize how we're feeling? How do we actually talk about how we're feeling? I said this before. I've taken those sheets with all the little faces on them. And when I work with people, the first thing I do is ask them, point out the emoji or the face that, based on what represents your feelings right now. And that's because I want people to be able to identify their feelings, name their feelings. Then the next question would be, how does that feel like in your body? What does that make you feel like? Because there's a physiological reaction in our bodies based on how we're feeling. How it feels significantly different when we feel happy versus discouraged, scared, sad. We're on pins and needles. Our body feels like it could be quivering. There's a lot of different reactions in our body based on our emotions. So to recognize emotions is so important, and to be able to understand why and what are your triggers. So important, because a lot of us haven't sat down to think about what are our triggers and how are we going to react or respond, more importantly respond to a situation like Brooke did, right? And so it's like, do you want that to escalate? We always talk about what's that end goal that you want, and that's when you really have some time to think about how you're going to respond. But what are you going to do in a situation where there's a lot where people are in turmoil right now and they're feeling a lot of angst, and they tend to let that go, and you tend to see it in a grocery store, you tend to see it in at work. So how are you going to respond versus react to that? We see it on a bus, on a train, and you hear people talking about things, and it might get you a little angry, or it might get you a little disturbed. Or how are you going to internalize that? How are you going to respond to that? How are you going to regulate your emotions? What does that look like for you? So when we do an assessment, right? We look at how somebody is presenting. What is their presenting symptoms? What are their presenting symptoms? How are they explaining it? How are they telling their story? Is it tangential? Is it circumstantial? Are they doing it from start to begin to end where it's a big long circle? Are they, there's so many ways that we're looking at this. We look at personality. So we each have a personality. You know your personality. You know the traits of your personality. Jen, you're always tagging me with those Aries things, right? Where
If they're
we,
true.
we because we have strong personalities, right? So with that strong personality, how do we regulate that personality as well to not inflate those emotions that we have,
Right.
right? And so we have to recognize our own personality traits because those can help us or those can also hinder us. And I know because I have a strong personality. And so as I grew up, I had to recognize some of the things that were helping me and supporting me in my job, at school, with my friends in regards to my own personality, right? My needs, my wants, and how was I going to get that? Was I being overly manipulative? Was I being, how was I acting? And so, based on my personality, based on my thoughts and perceptions around me, based on a lot of different things, we look at that from a clinical perspective. I want you to look at that too. I want you to take the time and look at these different nuances of yourself, of your being, and say, with all that said, with all these things that are happening, how am I perceiving the world? How am I perceiving a certain situation? What does that look like for me? And how do I want to be impacted by that? Because even though there's so many things going on right now, excuse me, and even though we could be scared and there potentially things that could really impact us in a way that could infiltrate our families, the way our the way we live, our daily lives, how are you going to self regulate knowing all of this? How are you going to practice this? Because you are still a model for other people as well as your own children. Jen?
Yeah, this morning I totally thought about the story about the lady that you just
Yeah.
shared a few minutes
Yeah.
ago because I was driving back home from the kickboxing studio, and this guy, and I'm already, so I'm in like a 40 mile per hour zone, or the street, that's the speed limit, and I was already going 45, and this guy was like tailgating me. I could have just braked, and
Oh, you could have
he
brake
like,
checked
that's
him.
how fast that's
Yeah.
how close he was. And I was like, I'm not going to speed up. I'm not going to speed up. I'm already going faster. So and I could just tell, I could just feel the tension. You know how that feels like, and there's somebody like that driving behind you, right? And I immediately thought about this lady that you're talking about, and of course it was probably a quarter of a mile that he was still like just doing that, and I'm like, I'm just gonna stay steady. I'm staying steady. And of course, you know how like then there was also like a truck next to me, so he's trapped, and like he's
Yes.
like waiting. I could feel it, and then he literally he goes he goes to the next lane. He goes next to me, and he even looks at me like I'm the crazy one. Like he looked at me like I was driving 20 miles an hour, and I'm already going 45, right? And I remember just I wanted to look back, and I just started laughing, and then I said to myself, you know what? I don't know what he's going through.
Yeah.
I have no idea what he's going through. And there was and then I let it go, and I was like, all right, it's too early for this. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna let it go because it's not worth it, right? It's not worth my energy. I'm safe. He's safe. No,
Yes.
he didn't hit anybody. So then he ended up making a turn. But there it reminded me of oh man, I don't have it right now, but there's this it was this image I saw it on Instagram like last month or maybe earlier this month, and it was all these cars like in gridlock, traffic and on a
Yeah.
freeway, every single car, and then above every little car there was a little bubble that said, I'm trying to get home to my mom, she's about to die.
Oh.
My child is sick. There's a little bubble that said, I'm rushing home to celebrate my anniversary with my wife. So there was like all these bubbles above the car,
Oh, wow.
and it made me cry because it's like we forget that when we're in that moment that we don't know what story is happening to every single individual and human being in those cars, and yet we get so stuck in our own bubble, and almost literally because we're in our car,
Yeah.
that we just think like everybody's an asshole. Nobody knows how to drive. And why is everybody driving like this? And yet, when I saw that with all these little dialogue bubbles with all these different scenarios, it's like, you just never know. You just never know what other people are going through at that moment. And then the thing that really got me was I thought, man, I wish everybody could see that and have that perspective, because then we would have so much more compassion for each other as human beings. And it's hard because only a few of us will do it, right? And that's
Right.
where it gets tough, because now it requires us to be more compassionate, even though we know a majority may not. A
Yeah.
majority may not care, and whatever. There's a whole different, everybody's dealing with stuff, and maybe they don't have the capacity. Maybe they're dealing with a mental illness, whatever the
Yeah.
case. But man, when I saw that, it just made me think, and I cried. And then there was another one where this one was a video where there was a scenario. This is bro. I gotta find it. I'll show it to you.
Okay.
I gotta find it. It was like this other scenario where this this lady is with this little kid, and they're at a coffee shop, like a Starbucks or something, and then she's like, "Hey, why don't you pick out a muffin or a snack? You want a snack?" And then the kid starts throwing this tantrum. I don't want this, and they're just like throwing a tantrum. And then there's a snooty another lady, older lady next to her, and going, "Oh gosh, yeah, just feed that brattiness. Can't even control your child." And so that was the one scene. Then it shows like previously the lady was adopting the little boy, and she's at the agency, and then they're like, yeah, this is his third family. We really hope that he can, you can, provide some love and a loving environment for him. And then he's like, hey buddy, why don't we get something to eat, let's go. And so he's all sad because he's now going to a new family. And
Yeah.
so there was like a series of things like that, and
Oh,
there was
wow.
so much judgment in the
Yeah.
previous scenes before it shows the after, and and then you're crying because you just realize, like, again, we just never know when people are in a very anxious situation and there's a lot of tension. We're so quick to judge. We're
Yeah.
so quick to just come to these conclusions of, like, whatever the stereotype may be. I mean, it's excellent. I gotta find this video, and but it reminded me of, like, we just have to have compassion for each other, because we don't know what other people are dealing with, and everybody has issues and problems and whatnot. But man, it's that's where I think it can be difficult, because when we have to regulate our emotions, we are, for lack of a better term, we have to ask ourselves to be the bigger person and to not judge, and to
Yeah.
just take a different approach and be compassionate and loving, and or maybe at least understanding that I don't know all the details, but let me just not let me not be reactive, and all those different things. But and then of course there's also the danger element. We don't know, like the scenario with the guy tapping on the lady's window. Like, to me,
Right.
I now in my head I'm thinking, I don't know who's carrying a gun. I don't know
Absolutely.
who's gonna beat
And
me up and drag me out of the car because they lost their freaking mind.
absolutely. And those are the things that we need to think about. It's really important to think about. And a lot of people might have, there are some people who have this kind of machismo attitude, like, I don't care, I'll take it on. And I'm like, listen, your family wants you around. You want to be here. Learn
Right.
how to self regulate, right? I want to read a couple of comments from
Mhm.
Bibiana. She says, and people who aren't self regulating are emboldened and a lot more verbal. It's hard to take the high road all the time. It,
Oh,
it really,
it
it,
is.
it is difficult. And that's why, you had mentioned, Bibiana, doing that exercise to help your emotions and help your neurons kind of regulate, right? And then also to be able to do like some detoxing, whether or not it's getting out from from behind technology, digital, technological, just detox. Take some time to detox from this stuff. Think about what you're watching. There was a time a few years ago that when we were going through the election that I just had to turn off the TV. I couldn't watch any more news. I didn't want to hear it, yet I love being informed, and I go to a lot of different channels to be informed. I do reading, articles, magazines, newspapers, you name it. And yet I just had to kind of turn it off because I realized that my emotions were getting all jumbled up. And I was like, man, I got to separate this stuff because when I internalize this stuff, it goes with me everywhere I go, whether it's shopping at the grocery store, to my job, or into a meeting, or, I don't want that.
Right.
That doesn't help me. So Bibiana says, when someone does that, I get in the left lane with my blinker and let them go past me. Then I get back in traffic and keep going. It's my way of not getting stressed by the bad tailgaters. Yeah, I have a funny. So I don't know where I saw this, but like those Uber signs that light up.
Yeah.
So there's a hand that lights up, and you have a remote control, and you can put it in your rear view, like in your back window, and you
Uh-huh.
put this hand. But when somebody's tailgating you or somebody's, pissing you off, you can actually press the button and it'll flip them off.
Oh, how funny.
So it can give the peace sign, it can flip you off, it can give like a wave sign. And I was like, man, my husband goes, you might be getting into trouble if you would.
Yeah. Let's not get that for you. Yeah.
Or
I
you.
yeah, that would be like on one permanent setting.
I know. I laughed so hard. I was like, oh my God, this would be
Right.
so dangerous, but this is hilarious.
Yeah, you know what? I actually had an idea, and I was like, "This is not going to work." But like, I was going to have like a sign that you could control it so that it
Yeah.
would flash the message behind on that mirror. But I'm like, nah, I might run into a crazy, and then they'll probably like ram into the back of the car and whatnot. And I was like, yeah, let's just scrap that idea.
There's a there's a show, I think it's called Beef on Netflix, and it started just that way where this guy was pulling out of like a grocery store parking lot, and he gets into this like situation with this woman, and then she follows him, and it just escalates. I mean, it goes on and on, where at the last episode, you don't know whether or not they killed each other. Like it just gets so bad where they break into each other's houses. It's like it
Just
it,
couldn't let
it
it go.
so here's the thing. We want to talk about the self-regulation because this is a time of uncertainty. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty throughout our lives, right? It's just that it feels very heavy right now because there are a lot of things coming at us that I think we were anticipating, but now we're seeing them unfold. And so watching how that's impacting others, how that's impacting families, community, I think that can be really hard for a lot of people. So I want you to take some time to reflect on your own emotions, being able to identify your emotions, understand why you're feeling a certain way. Exercise, look at something green, while you're sitting at your computer, to relax your body, to relax your eyes. Take and shift your eyes away from your computer, do a digital detox. There are things that you can do to help self-regulate. Let me give you one of the things that I do. So I went to Target, and um, I love looking at their dollar section, right?
Hmm.
Just, I don't know. I wish I had kids so I could just buy a bunch of things. So I'm like, oh, I'd love to give you this or that. Well, I'm a kid too. So I bought this pen, which is all these different colors for like $1.
Oh my gosh, that's fun!
Fun. And it's got all this little,
I
but
like the colors.
I also bought these for $1.
Is that Play-Doh?
It's Play-Doh.
Okay.
So when I'm sitting at my desk, yesterday's meeting, you probably didn't even notice, but I take it out and I start just working with it. So I start working with it. I start rolling with it. I've had this for a couple of weeks. So when I'm in meetings and I'm listening to people and I want to stay focused, and I also just want to work with my hands because I'm a multitasker. So I like to do a lot of things. So this helps me. So,
Ooh.
and it's $1 for 3 different colors, and they're scented and they're fun, and I
Oh,
love it.
does
So
it smell like a fruit? Like whatever the
yeah,
color is?
this one
Like
smells
grape?
like grape, strawberry, and this one
Oh.
smells like orange. And so it's $1. And honestly, there are ways that we can help ourselves self-regulate. They can be small ways. They can be going out and running, and getting those endorphins, pumping. There can be so many ways. It can be, taking time to cultivate a hobby, whether or not my husband does kayaking. He loves to go out, and that helps his mental health as well, right? And so there are so many different ways. It doesn't have to be a big way. It can just be getting outside. Bibiana had, she said, squishmallows. Yeah, and she had also
Mhm.
talked about in the past just going outside and putting her feet in the grass, right? So it can just be little things that we really enjoy that kind of just bring us that breath of fresh air that we really need to get recentered. Mike says one of the things I like to do is watch comedies. I love the Dick Van Dyke Show, the Honeymooners, and recently the old George Lopez shows. You know, Mike, I love the Dick Van Dyke Show. That makes me, it's so much fun. I love Lucy, those old shows. So find something like that as well that you can watch, that you can do. That I have a treadmill here. So yesterday I actually got on my treadmill and I was like, oh, I just need to walk this off, right? So there's just things that we can do to manage our anxiety. There's a lot coming at us, but remember, we still have a source of control, and that is our internal gauge as to how we view the world, our perception about what's going on. And that can make a huge difference based on, are we separating how we look at these things emotionally or factually, right?
Right.
And a lot of times when we can separate those two things, it doesn't allow us to, I've used this word before, but catastrophize or bring everything together all at once where we just let it blow way out of proportion, right? We're going to get through this. We have each other. I do want to pass on a resource though. If you feel overwhelmed, if you feel like you need to talk to somebody who will not judge you, call 988. That is an available resource for you. If you're feeling that way, 988. So, with that said, Jen, any other words of wisdom or
Oh, I'm
anything?
going to read what Mike said. He said, he meant heart. A merry heart does good like medicine. It's from
Is that Mary Hartman? Mary Hartman, is that the one?
oh, no, it's he mean like Merry Christmas, like a happy
Oh, yes.
um where did it go? A merry heart does good like medicine. Yeah. I love comedy. I have my go-to comedians like Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock.
Oh,
It's like
yeah.
if I start laughing, then it's kind of like I'm just immediately like like
Ah,
I just kind of forget about what I was mad about. So
yeah.
comedy humor is yeah, very hard. You're laughing and it does increase endorphins, and now you're laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to it's hard to stay mad if you're allowing yourself to laugh.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and then Mike and Vivian are talking about nails looking good during COVID.
Yeah, nails looking good, skincare, healthcare, making a smoothie, finding a new recipe. If you like to cook, I love to bake and love to give it away because baking for me is really relaxing and there's an art to it as well, right? And you can be really creative. Same with cooking. And I love, I go to my neighbors and I start giving the stuff away and they're like, oh, okay. And it makes their day, right? So I love doing that when I actually have the time. And for me, sometimes it is just sitting down and kind of reading something, right? Or just zoning out and watching something. So
Right.
I'm laughing. I love to laugh. Jen loves to laugh. We laugh together.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got our Aries memes in the DMs. That's enough for regulating our
Oh,
emotions.
oh my God. There's this new guy that I'm watching, and I think he's from Scotland. He's hilarious. And he ends by saying, something like, I'm so tasty, follow me, right? Or something like he's
I love it when people come up with their clever little like phrases.
he is hilarious. And it's so funny because my husband had shown me this guy over the weekend and like some videos of him. And yesterday, Claudia sent me something in the DMs and she said, oh, have you seen this guy? I'm like, yes, my husband just showed me. And she's like, he is hilarious. I'm like, I know. I'm going to have to send you something, Jen.
Yeah.
We'll laugh. But with that said, thank you, everybody. I want to read what Mike says. I believe in having an emotional fitness program and practice. I love that, Mike. We're gonna have to talk
Mm.
more about that. I wish you would have dropped some comments in here, about what that means, and maybe we can mention that again because emotional fitness program and practice so important. Thank you for mentioning that. And if you want to know more, folks, and you're listening to this or you've been part of this today, the show, or if you watch the replay, contact Mike, DM him about his emotional fitness program and what that means. And then Bibiana says, totally got to keep your own peace. And that guy is funny. He looks like a Tolkien character. Totally. He so does. And you know who I'm talking about, Bibiana.
Oh, now I
Oh,
gotta see what this
oh
guy
my
looks.
God. You've got to see it. I'll send you some stuff, Jen.
Does he look like a hobbit?
It's so funny. He's hilarious. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you didn't catch all of this live show today, please watch the replays. And you can go to our Instagram page, our YouTube page, and also to LinkedIn to watch the replay. All right. Any last words, Jen?
Nope.
All
And
right, let's dance this out. Bye, everyone. Thank you for hanging with us. Woo! Bye, everyone. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a great week. See you next Tuesday.